Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Daily Gwei Drive-Thru. I'm your host, Anthony Sassano, and I'm here with Eric Conner today to talk about all things Ethereum. Hey, Eric, how you going?
Yo, we back. I think
We
it's been
back. We back.
been
4
a
months
little
later.
while. Yeah, exactly. I had someone comment on I tweeted like 2 days ago I was doing this with you, and someone commented like they liked the randomness and not knowing when we're gonna do this, which is kind of
Y-
funny. But yeah, we're definitely random at it. But hey, we're still going. We haven't fully rug pulled yet.
Yeah, exactly. And I think like we do these episodes probably at like the most relevant and right times to do them. I did tease on Twitter that we'd be talking, or Farcaster actually, that we'd be talking about kind of our price target for ETH this cycle and how we kind of arrived at that number. And I remember doing these episodes with like DC Investor and Cyrus Unesi back in the day, like on Bankless, like back last cycle. And like going back and rewatching that was hilarious because like you were really bearish, I guess, compared to us. You were saying, like, oh, 2,500, right? And then like DC, I remember was like super bullish. He was like 10K plus or something. And like it just landed in like the middle, I guess, at like 5K. But I think that this time around we have something different. We have the ETFs, right? Like, and I think that's going to play a huge part in how this cycle plays out. Has already played a huge part in it, and I think that that's the first thing I wanted to talk about today with regards to kind of this meme of the 4 year cycle, right? And I think that we've actually broken out of that at this point. Like BTC hit like 50K today. I mean, for those of you who are listening to this, we're recording this on like it's my 13th, the Tuesday, and this is probably going to go out on the Saturday, so it's probably going to be a few days. But BTC hit 50K today, and I think that that has broken like the traditional 4 year cycle. It's accelerated it by at least 3 to 6 months or something, because usually you would wait until like the halvening, and then the halvening would happen, and then BTC would go up like after that, and then it would hit all time highs. But it kind of feels like the momentum right now means that we could see all time highs in Q2. Like that's how I mean frothy things are. And the thing is, I think it's a kind of justified froth to an extent because we were just discussing this a little bit off air. Basically, people just completely misread the ETF stuff. Like I think a lot of crypto natives just do not understand how TradFi works and do not understand how ETFs work, and they figured that it'll be a sell the news event, which I guess it was for a little bit of time, but it's a sell the news event. Grayscale has like these GPTC outflows, whatever, and so on and so forth. And then the reality was that these ETFs that went live, some of the biggest ETF launches in ETF history, right? Like in terms of the volumes that they've brought in. So I think, yeah, there's just like been a massive amount of people sidelined, and now the FOMO is really kicking in since BTC has gone to 50K. ETH is moving as well, of course. It's lagged a little bit, but we'll get into that. But yeah, I mean, Eric, I've mentioned this tons of times when we've done podcasts before, but you have the typical TradFi background before you got into crypto. You're definitely more plugged into that world than most, I would think. Like what's your view on all of that? Like, did people severely underestimate things like I kind of assume they did?
Yeah, no, it's funny to even have this conversation going back. I mean, gosh, what, 6 years now? If you go back to like into the Ether episodes where we were kind of predicting this would happen around now. And I think what people miss most, and I agree with you, I think a large amount of people are sidelined right now. Like even like kind of hardcore crypto people on Twitter, I just get the vibe that they're not like 100% in, maybe they're like 30%, not their 100% allocation. And I think where people fumbled this bag was everyone in crypto is used to like the typical memes of, sell the news, buy the rumor, sell the news. And like that just becomes this Twitter narrative, right? And like when Twitter narratives take off in crypto in like a small community like we have, or like I would say we had, sure, that like that's what everybody starts buying into, right? Like this starts snowballing, and it's like you see it in bear and bull cycles and all the emotion of crypto Twitter and just in the graphs. Everything snowballs and people start believing it's almost self-fulfilling, right? So everyone was like, oh, it's clearly a sell the news event. And that was self-fulfilling for like 3 weeks. But I was kind of hammering it on Twitter, kind of joking about it, like, oh, great, you guys are smart for like a couple weeks, but you're going to be wrong. And the reason they're wrong is we just invited a whole new audience of people and capital into the crypto markets with this ETF stuff, right? And you and I've hit on this so much in the past. It's like we're comfortable investing in Coinbase. We're comfortable self-custodying our own wallets. We're comfortable in Uniswap and onboarding off of Coinbase Uniswap and doing all this stuff. A lot of people either want their financial investor to tell them it's now safe to buy crypto, or they want to buy it through E-Trade or Fidelity or whatever it might be. And ETFs open that up, right? And a lot of people have 401k funds that they weren't able to buy crypto with. I mean, you could buy like futures and stuff, but in general, people were kind of waiting. Like I know we don't like this in crypto, but they're kind of waiting for this like stamp of approval from like higher beings in the financial world, right? And I think people just grossly underestimate how much buying power is there now. We've tapped into this, I mean, it's trillions of dollars with the capital that we had previously tapped into that can be like buying now. And I think it was no coincidence. We're recording this on my Monday at 8:30 p.m. But like when the markets opened for me this morning at 6:30 a.m. here on the West Coast, all of a sudden Bitcoin and ETH took off, right? And like Bitcoin led, but like there's no coincidence that the bidding is happening now during market hours. It's just kind of funny. Like we're kind of dead now, like in the middle of the night US time and on the weekends. There's a lot of money trickling in. Now, a lot of institutions I think are like getting more in now and stuff because they're seeing all this happen. But I think where the crypto community missed is like our little memes and our little echo chamber of Twitter and Farcaster. That stuff is kind of being overtaken by the bigger allocations of funds, like whether it's the institutions or just the combined capital of retail normies kind of buying in their 401ks or buying in their brokerage portfolios now. And that stuff adds up, right? And like, can you imagine these guys telling their friends and neighbors, like, yeah, I bought the Bitcoin ETF like today and it's up 7%. I mean, 7% to these people is like crazy. And I don't mean like these people, but it is like normie finance, right? Like 7 to 10% is like what you kind of hope for in the entire year. And I think we're going to see that snowball and like that access to crypto now is going to be a total game changer for people.
It's funny because like the people who have the most money are like the most conservative, right? Like they're the ones who want to protect their capital, but that's where a lot of the wealth is concentrated. And as you said, these people don't move unless their financial advisor tells them to move, especially into things that are considered super risky, like crypto assets, which is hilarious to me because Bitcoin is worth $1 trillion right now, right? It's $1 trillion market cap. Like it's bigger than most stocks in terms of market cap. So for people to kind of still think that Bitcoin is risky is more of a perception thing. And that's what the ETFs have really done is it's changed the perception around BTC. And in the future, it's going to change it around ETH as well, where people go, oh, wow, okay, BlackRock is putting their weight behind this thing. It must be legit, right? It must be here to stay. I got to get in. And as you said, like because crypto still moves, pretty I guess like violently or is pretty volatile, even BTC and ETH. This is again a selling point for people that have never had exposure before because they're suddenly looking at this asset that they bought, as you said, like going up a few percentage points in a day, and they're like, oh my god, wow, what the hell, like what the hell's going on, right? So it is a kind of self-fulfilling thing, and I think that BTC obviously has gotten such a bid from it. I mean, if you go back to June last year when BlackRock first filed for it, like BTC was at 25K. So if you bought then and then just held for the last like 6-7 months or whatever it is, you'd be up like double your money on the safest asset in crypto, arguably, right? And you'd be up on ETH, you'd be up on a lot of things, to be honest. But as you said, like it just seems like so many crypto natives is so sidelined right now. They're like hoping that we're going up. They're like, oh no, this is gonna sell back down. BTC is going to 35K, and then I'll buy there. It's like, guys, like the ETFs, they're not waiting for this. They're passive flow vehicles, right? Like they're not going to wait to buy the dip and things like that, like the crypto natives are. They're basically going to be like, okay, well, I'm allocating 1% of my portfolio to this BTC ETF right now, and 1% of the money that's in TradFi that the boomers have, especially, is a lot of money. People don't realize that it's a lot of money. So that alone will just kind of keep the price kind of up and keep things going very nicely. And I think that we're just like generally entering, I guess, soon to be kind of frothy phase of the bull market, the normal bull market that we see in crypto. So it's going to be very interesting to see what the dynamic is like because, BTC has its ETF. As I said before, ETH's going to get its ETFs relatively soon. I do believe it's actually going to happen in May, to be honest. Like May 23rd is that first deadline there. We can touch on that in a sec. But it's going to be interesting to see what happens to the other assets because people are already fading the other assets, saying, oh, none of this is going to trickle down because, the boomers can't access these assets. They can only buy BTC and then ETH. It's like, what do you mean? Like, who do you think owns all the BTC and ETH right now? It's the crypto natives. And what do you think they're going to do when they suddenly come into all this new money? They're going to go down the risk curve like they typically do. So people kind of trying to fade the other things as well is just hilarious to me because it's like BTC Max is just like yelling, oh, it's just BTC, just buy. It's like, yeah, okay, maybe that works over long term, but people are still going to gamble. People are still going to speculate. Like crypto natives are still crypto natives. And we've even been seeing this play out over just the last few months. A lot of people who were in BTC made a lot of money because because of the ETF kind of speculation, and then they've rolled that into other things. So I think that people really need to be aware of the fact that there's always going to be that pool of money. It's called, I guess it's that hot ball of money, as they call it, that's just still going to rotate through things. But over the longer term, obviously, like you're not going to keep most of your portfolio in these things, right? You keep it in the safer assets, or at least the assets that you consider to be safer. But that's my kind of general view on things.
Yeah, I think one important thing that you said is like a lot of the financial wealth, especially in like the boomer generation or just even in like our generation, I don't think much of that is allocated to crypto at all. Like I have some like non-crypto family and friends that do have like a decent crypto allocation now, but even that's like, I don't know, 5% of their total portfolio. And I have a lot of people that have said to me, oh yeah, like my financial advisor doesn't recommend it yet, but how much would you recommend investing? And they still like 0%, but they want to like get to 5 to 10% someday. Like I think people don't realize how underinvested people really are to this asset class when you look at like the world as a whole. Yeah, like a lot of us might be like mentally ill and have 100% of our net worth in crypto, but like that's not a normal person out there, right? And I think this ETF is like this stamp of legitimacy to that. And I think what's going to be interesting is will be I agree with you. I think ETH will get approved. I mean, first of all, like Larry Fink's behind it. He's like 564 and one in ETF approvals. Like everybody, like what is that, like Franklin Templeton or whatever filed
Hmm.
for it today. Like there's a lot of reputable institutions. Now, where I think this starts to get really interesting is so there's two parts of this. I want to talk about your part about like this trickling down, which I agree with you. But first, like, are we kind of drawing a line in the sand of ETF approved crypto assets? And let's say that's Bitcoin and ETH. There's a clear line, not just in like market cap at that point, but just in like globally accepted like I don't want to say like the government has to give it stamp of approval, but I think it like speaks to Bitcoin and ETH like drive to become money and become decentralized and have smaller blocks and like don't become centralized, right? And truly become money and have a low issuance policy or even a deflationary policy. Like, I think all of this is important. And I don't think there's a single crypto that will ever exist in the future. This isn't me being an ETH maxi, but like that will exist that will have the same kind of reputation and traits as Bitcoin and ETH would to that point. And that's not to say like another crypto is not going to get an ETF approval, but I think in the short term, Bitcoin and ETF, and then there's going to be this line drawn to other assets. And that doesn't mean like those assets aren't going to go up, but like when people look at those two, they're going to think of them in the same league. And like that's important for ETH, right? And like is why like as a community, we've been hitting on like decentralization and money aspects and money traits and like low inflation and like a sound monetary policy. Like those things are all paying off, right? And so I'm with you. I think it will come in May. And if it does, that's a very interesting dynamic now for the crypto community. And of course, will then flow down. Now, like if ETH starts getting a bid like BTC is, I mean, that's going to get interesting, right? Because we all know like the perspective of, oh, Bitcoin's 60,000 and ETH is only 2,600. Like normies kind of think like this, right? They don't think about market cap. Oh, it's cheaper. It could go up more. And these are like the two assets they're looking at. That gap's going to start to close, in my opinion, right? Just because of those like very simple things. Like I've been a proponent that we should 1,001 split ETH. I know it's going to like wreck smart contracts. We don't actually do it. But if ETH went down to like $2 tomorrow with the same market cap, it would get bid up like crazy. That's just how people think. So now you kind of got this like newer assets that's approved for ETF. It's not just Bitcoin anymore. It's kind of this shiny new toy for people. To them, it's quote unquote cheaper. I guess from a market cap perspective, it is. I mean, if you get that bid on ETH, things could get crazy, right? I don't want to go like too nuts with my predictions. I know I was under last, but to me, 20K seems very like achievable. I put out a tweet a couple of weeks ago. If you take BTC's I always think ETH's like one cycle behind. Every cycle your multiplier from bottom to top is going to get less, right? Because it's harder to move up with market cap. If you take BTC's multiplier from last cycle, I think it was 22x, which would put, I think ETH bottom at 890. It puts us at like, I think right below 20K, like 19,300 or something, and below Thru. And I know people think 50K, 100K, who knows? I shoot on the downside usually. I mean, 20K would be great. And then that's a meme line to push us through. But I think just that like that line that could get drawn in the sand for crypto is very interesting. Will money flow down then? Of course, right? We always see that. And like I don't think the fund really starts to all-time highs are blown through. I know this like is the start of a bull market, but like the real fun of a bull market is ETH goes past 4,900 and BTC goes past 69,000 and we're in price discovery and then shit just gets crazy. I mean, you don't know where it's going. Random shit coins are pumping 300% on the day. Like that's when it gets fun. But I'm curious your thoughts. Like, do you see that same kind of line being drawn like after ETH gets approved for the next few years? Like, do you think those are just going to be the two? Like, to you, how important is that from like a money flow bid and that kind of perspective from investors?
Yeah, I mean, I think even outside of like the ETFs, the line has been drawn for a long time, right? Because if you look at BTC and ETH's combined market cap right now, if I'm going to CoinGecko and I look at it, it's like 1.3 trillion, right? The total market cap is 2 trillion. Take away stablecoins, 1.8. So you have $500 billion in like other assets. Most of that is concentrated in things like BNB and XRP, which is just crazy to me, and a few others there. But if you actually look at, you were talking about market caps. If you actually look at the long tail of crypto assets, like I'm talking about things that are outside of the top 10, they're all under $10 billion market cap, right? They are all extremely small compared to big. That's 1% of Bitcoin's market cap, by the way, for people kind of tracking at home. That's 1%. A $10 billion market cap is 1%. Of ETH, it's I guess like what is it, 4-5% or something like that, right? I'm just doing rough math top of my head. These things are incredibly small compared to ETH and BTC. So it does, as you said, take a lot more money to move ETH and BTC and a lot less money to move other things. Does that mean these other things are going to be good long-term investments? No, because it works both ways. Like if these things are just going up because it's a crypto bull market and everything's pumping, then they're going to be the first things that get sold off once the bear market hits because no one actually wants to hold them. They're just gambling on them basically, right? So again, that line in the sand has been drawn, I think, before the ETFs. And I think the ETFs are just going to exacerbate that because, as I said before, the ETFs are a passive vehicle, right? There's going to be a lot of people just putting money in, like every paycheck as part of their retirement account, right? Every paycheck going in there passively over time. They're not going to wait to try and like time the crypto cycles like crypto natives have traditionally done. They're definitely just going to be like this passive buyer of these assets. And that again is going to concentrate a lot more market cap, I believe, in BTC and ETH and a lot less in these other things, outside of bull markets. Obviously, like as you said, like once we get past all-time high, things get really crazy. Everything just starts going up, indiscriminately. But I'm looking at it from like I don't know, if I was to take a 5-year window, that's what I'm kind of looking at it in. I'm not looking at it in a kind of 1 year peak bull market window or 6 to 12 months peak bull market window. Because if you look at that, then of course you can go, oh, Doge outperformed everything. I was like, yeah, for like 3 months, right? Like it doesn't count because if you caught the bottom and top, good on you, but most people didn't. So I think I look at it from like a 5-year window and I'm like, okay, what's ETH and BTC going to be like in 5 years in terms of market cap? What's these other things going to be like? And how have they performed against BTC and ETH? I think their performance is going to get a lot worse over these kind of longer periods because of those ETFs bringing in that money. And as you said, it's a fresh, untapped pool of money. Like almost all of this money has never touched crypto before. I would wager, right? So it's definitely a fresh, untapped pool, and I think we needed it honestly to get to the next level because I feel like we hadn't tapped everything, but like a lot of the money that was coming into crypto, I think came in 2020, 2021 from like the normal retail users already, especially in places like the US and Europe where they already had easy access to this stuff, and we kind of needed this next step in order to get us to the next level here, in order to get these market caps into the trillions of dollars. But as you said earlier, we were talking about this a long time ago on the Into the Ether episodes. I mean, I'd love to find the episode where I do distinctly remember you saying or talking about ETF, saying that you don't expect it to happen for a while, but eventually it will happen. And we're basically there right now, right? Like we're basically kind of there in 2024, which did take a while, but we're there now. It kind of accelerates from here. And I guess the last thing on the ETF stuff as well, before we move on to how we get to 20K ETH this cycle, so is that people are kind of memeing that these other assets are going to get ETFs. Like maybe eventually they do, but the timeline for this happening is like, from what I've seen, minimum 3 years for any other asset to even think about getting an ETF. And it's not because these other assets, are securities or the SEC is trying to label them as securities. It's not because we're ETH maxes and we think that all the other assets are trash. It's the simple reason that there is a very defined path to getting an ETF. You have to have a CME futures market. Like that's like literally the bare minimum. There are no other CME futures markets except BTC and ETH right now for crypto assets. As far as I know, I don't think there are. So until you actually see another asset get that futures market, its chances of getting an ETF is 0%. And then once they actually get that market, you need to wait like 2-3 years before the SEC would be comfortable actually approving these things. So again, that's why I say minimum 3 years before you see any of the other assets. So ETH and BTC will stand alone here. Do I like that that's the case? I mean, from a kind of like competition perspective, not necessarily, but at the same time, like I'm, I can't control this. It's not me. It's the way these things work, right? It's the way TradFi works. And honestly, if I'm putting my kind of, I guess, biased hat on here, I wouldn't want to be putting dog shit assets in front of like people that have like retirement accounts and they're putting them into like, you know what I mean? Like there is some level of kind of responsibility, I think, as well, of kind of, I wouldn't say protecting people from themselves, but man, like the amount of like low education that would exist. And if you start giving legitimacy to these assets that really are like a lot of them are just borderline scams to me. And you like, they're borderline not great from a, not just investment perspective, but just from a kind of like perspective of this space getting like a bad name as it usually does. But at the end of the day, people can invest in whatever they want. They still have access to these assets on other platforms if they really want to buy them. But yeah, it's kind of a thing where that's how the SEC is going to be thinking about it. That's how the regulators are going to be thinking about it as well. And that's the kind of final thing on that one. But unless you have anything left to add on the ETF stuff, I want to get into how ETH is going to 20K because I think people are like, they hear this number and they're like, oh, okay, 20K, that's like this moon math, but like, how are we getting there? So if you want to move on to that, we can.
Yeah, sounds good to me. I think the only thing I'll say on that is like I agree. Like I would never cheer for an ETF rejection for another crypto, but I do think it's important that the process is kind of like followed. And I think even though maybe the SEC is frustrating and these approvals have been frustrating, at the same time, like it seems like the proper path, like for Bitcoin to just recently get one, for ETH to be next, there be like a little break and let's like see who maybe is up next for legitimacy wise. But like it kind of seems like it's playing out fine to me so far.
Yeah, exactly. And the funny thing is, some people might be disappointed that XRP might be the next one to get an ETF simply because they won a court case against the SEC, right? So some people might be just like, be careful what you wish for. I mean, unless you're holding XRP, then you're going to be happy. But regardless of that, so how are we getting to 20K? So I want to make clear that my kind of quote unquote official prediction for this cycle is like 15 to 20K. Like I don't know if we're going to get to 20K. Like as you said, there are these kind of like diminishing returns with the multipliers and stuff like that. And then if everyone's expecting 20K, right, it might just kind of settle at 15K because everyone's expecting it and so on and so forth. ETFs throw a wrench into this though. Like we don't know how that's going to act, of course. But yeah, I do think that ETH's path to like 15 to 20K is pretty clear from here for a number of different reasons. And I think the most obvious reason is obviously the ETF. Like if you believe the ETH ETFs are going to get approved this year, particularly in May, which is the first final deadlines, I should say, then that is a huge catalyst. And we probably could even be up at like 4K or something by the time that happens, right? Similar to what happened with BTC, where the market just basically priced it in. We come down a bit after that, and then we can kind of continue up to all-time highs sort of thing. You know, it could play out in a similar way. But that's like I think the biggest catalyst, to be honest. Like I can't think of anything bigger than that in terms of just bringing in fresh new money to get us to those levels. But then there are so many other things that are going on within crypto, like crypto native things, Ethereum native things, right? There's the restaking thing happening, which we'd never had before. Like this is brand new stuff right now, right? There's the fact that ETH continues to be deflationary. There's the fact that like a lot of the execution risk of Ethereum is basically gone because we did the merge, right? We did it in a bear market. We got staking withdrawals done, and now way more people are staking now because of restaking and things like that, right? We have a very defined Ethereum roadmap at this point, which is something that the ETF issuers can actually break down for their clients and say, hey, you know, Ethereum has this kind of like roadmap, it's executing on it, blah, blah, so on and so forth. You know, we have all these kind of material here. We have the layer twos that are now available for people to use. And we're improving them all the time, right? Then they've got direct integrations with centralized exchanges. All these new users are going to be funneled into things like Base because Coinbase has a vested interest in Base doing well, right? They're going to be funneled into Arbitrum and they're going to, and Polygon and all these other L2 ecosystems. They're going to be funneled into there instead of L1 mainnet again, right? And they're not going to have to pay the high fees. They can enjoy the cheaper fees there. So, and that obviously reinforces ETH as money, gets ETH into more people's hands because ETH is used to pay the little fees on the network. It's used as money on the network, so on and so forth. So there are all these massive catalysts that we haven't had before. Really, they're kind of brand new, especially restaking. Like restaking and the ETFs, I think, are the two main ones because they're the brand new ones that haven't happened before. So from a fundamental perspective, it's very strong, but then a narrative perspective as well, it's very strong, right? Because the narrative is typically more powerful than the reality over the short to medium term, especially during crypto bull markets, where people start kind of shilling these things as being like the silver bullets, right? The things that are going to solve everything, it's going to be amazing and awesome, so on and so forth. And it's not until the bear market that you see the reality kind of set in. So I think that it's going to be a massive driver going forward for ETH value accrual. And I also think that we're going to see a trend start soon. I put a tweet out about this. With projects airdropping their tokens to ETH stakers, right? And we already have a lot of liquid restaking projects that have confirmed that they're doing tokens. Etherfi, Puffer, and Swell, the ones at the top off the top of my head, they have already confirmed that they're doing tokens. They've got airdrop or kind of like points farming thing going on right now, and they're liquid restaking protocols, which means that they're going to airdrop to ETH stakers that stake with them, and then they have a choice to airdrop to solo stakers as well, which I think that they might. So there's going to be a lot of kind of airdrops going towards ETH stakers, which is going to increase the demand for ETH because you have to obviously purchase ETH in order to stake it, right? So there's just all these kind of flywheel effect drivers happening that are all going to feed off of each other. And then if we're in a crypto bull market, these airdrops are going to end up be worth a lot, right? Because there's a lot of capital ready to just bid these things and to just kind of keep the market caps high from the kind of FOMO, and then those airdrops end up being huge, absolutely massive, and that brings in more capital. So like I guess like the point is that there is just so many demand drivers on ETH right now, and there's not that much ETH on the market, especially because we're deflationary too. So there's just less and less ETH on the market. People like to use ETH as a store of value and as a money. We're going to have the fresh capital coming in from the ETFs. Like I'm actually amazed that ETH is still at whatever it is, 2650 right now. Like I actually think that it's crazy that ETH is this low. And we're actually going to talk about ETH BTC as well after I get your thoughts on ETH USD. But that's kind of my view on the path to 15 to 20K. And I think obviously you probably have like a similar view here as well on all of this. But I'd love to get your kind of take on that side of things.
Yeah, I honestly think we're about to see a slingshot for many reasons. I think people had been kind of harping on the wrong narratives out there in the crypto community for the last few months. And I think I want to call this bull market. The theme is the Larry Fink supply shrink. so basically, you hit on most of that, right? But Larry Fink's
That's great. I love that. Larry Fink supply. That should be a meme on Twitter or something.
Yeah, let's meme that up. I want to make a couple images. I'll put them out there. But, we got Larry Fink on the ETF side and all the TradFi guys trying to buy up ETH. And like, one thing I think BlackRock alone owns and their ETF owns like 1% of all BTC. I think like 1 to 3% of all BTC.
I think it was almost like 300,000 BTC or something's already in the ETFs, like something crazy, right?
A ton, right? So like think about that. Like that's ETH that potentially is going to get swallowed up by ETFs, and that's growing every day. And then to your points with like the restaking and just staking in general, and especially if airdrops start happening to stakers, people want to stake more. And you have deflationary ETH, which is happening already like early in the bull market. Imagine like if all this airdrop farming starts happening and ETH's going up, like ETH's going to be very deflationary. The supply shrink is crazy. And you have this demand on the ETF side and just general bull market side. I mean, it's just like waiting to be lit on fire, right? And I know 20K maybe sounds crazy to people, but at the same time, that's less than 10x from here, right? And we've already been, what are we already up from bottom? We're already up 3x from bottom.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, about 3x. Yeah.
Yeah, 3x.
But I think over 3x now. 880, I think, was the bottom. Yeah. So maybe just over 3x. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's less than 10x to go to 20K. And I know, like we've said, I want to be very clear, as market cap gets bigger, it's harder to do it 10x, right? We're no longer at $80 and that's only 800 for ETH. But, I think with all these things about to happen, it doesn't seem too hard to me. I mean, shit, 10K is less than 4x from here, right? So, I mean, we're not far from these numbers, even though they sound huge. And I think the tailwinds and the narratives that are about to take place for ETH, I mean, like I said, Larry Fink's supply shrink. Like you combine these things, and people are going to start thinking, oh man, ETH's like deflationary and there's restaking and people are staking and locking things up for airdrops and ETF demand. And then it starts clicking in people's head, right? And I think we always see this early in bull cycles, this kind of like narrative focus from most of crypto Twitter around fast, large blockchains. And like we've been through this 3 or 4 times, right? I don't even want to get into names and blah, blah, blah. Like we've had this conversation so many times, but this is always like the narrative early on, like low fees, fast blockchains. And then people start to kind of like think, okay, what's like the long-term investment thesis here, right? Like what's the inflation rate of this asset? Do I really like need a lot of it to use this network? Like, is it inflationary? Is it deflationary? Is it a money? Is it not? Does it have an ETF? Does it not? And like all these things start to add up from an investor standpoint. Sure, maybe the users, whatever. I don't even want to go into it. But then you start thinking about like layer two. They're all launching. We have the ETH upgrade soon coming with blobs. It's going to make layer two a lot cheaper for users to use. I personally think the UX, like you mentioned, I remember, by the way, we were doing podcasts well before Coinbase and exchanges allowed you to withdraw for free to layer twos. And we were saying like a UX holy grail will be when Coinbase lets you withdraw to all these layer twos. We have that now. I think in general, the ETH layer 2 UX disaster talk is totally FUD, pretty much made up exclusively by people that hate Ethereum. Can it be better? Of course. Any of this can be better. We all know MetaMask can be better. Layer 2 UX can be better. Is it fine? Yeah. Like you could, if you want to get on Arbitrum, it's very easy to get on there pretty much for free, right? And use it. Fragmentation, all that's a totally different debate. But all this starts to add up and like people slowly think, like, okay, well, what asset am I actually investing in? And I think ETH starts to become a lot more attractive as it happens. Now, what's funny is, right, like as price goes up, of course, it becomes more attractive. People, now it's going up, right? It looks great. But I think I just quickly want to hit on airdropping to solo stakers. I'm a little surprised this hasn't happened yet. And I think when it does happen, it's going to start a waterfall effect of this. Because if you are a new project or a layer two or whatever that's doing an airdrop, like that seems like a great user base to drop to, right? Like these people are clearly invested in ETH. Like they've learned how to solo stake. They're probably still staking if you're doing an airdrop to them. Like that seems like the crowd you would want to give like part of your airdrop to, right? Like it seems like a crowd that's not going to just take it probably and instantly dump it or like FUD it or like weird things like that, right? So I think that's a pretty cool thing to see. I'll be interested to see how it's done, how many projects do it. I would probably think like layer twos, like I mentioned, would be like kind of the first to try it out for multiple reasons. But yeah, and then we get into the whole restaking thing, which that I think I personally haven't staked in layer yet, just because I don't know, I'm pretty risk averse at this point to my ETH. But I know a lot of people are. There's a lot of ETH in there. They're going to be worth billions of dollars. A lot of people are going to make a lot of money there. And just kind of more importantly, like the use cases, the data availability layer they're going to be doing to kind of make things cheaper in general for users. I mean, the mind share is still in ETH. I know like people get distracted by, oh, this chain launch is cheaper. But like, if you actually think about like the innovation and mind share that's out there, you always want to follow that, right? And like BTC kind of had this first mover and they kind of like lowered the IQ of their narrative, which to them has worked for them. Digital gold, we're going to keep it simple. We're going to claim we're always going to have zero issuance or eventually zero issuance, low inflation. ETH has kind of fallen in this weird middle ground where it's like, we're going to be innovative. We're going to try things, but it's going to take time. And then you kind of have these competitors that have come in on the other side, say, that promise all these crazy things. But when you really break it down and really think about the asset you're investing in, I mean, it's hard to beat ETH, right? But those narratives are complex and can take a while for people to digest. And I think that's just what we're seeing. But once this fire gets lit under ETH and once the ETF comes and the supply shrink, I mean, it in my opinion, is going to blow up. That's personally why I see it going to 20K and beyond.
Yeah, yeah, and I think like the competitors kind of discussion is an interesting one, and it's probably something that a lot of people think about. Like as you said, like this has been the same thing every cycle really for ETH, and I mean even for Bitcoin. Like people don't remember, but Bitcoin used to have like competitors. I mean, if you were in the know, you knew that they weren't really competitors, but like people kind of shilled them as competitors. You know, people would say, "Oh, Ripple's a competitor to Bitcoin back in 2013, Litecoin as well, and like all these other forks at the time." And then people were saying, you know,
Bitcoin
Ethereum Ethereum
Cash flipped ETH.
Yeah, well, yeah, exactly. And then, you would say Ethereum is a competitor to Bitcoin as well. And I mean, I still believe ETH is a competitor to BTC to be money and to be a store of value and all that. But, there's always going to be like competitors. There's always going to be other projects that try to get the limelight by attacking the kind of tallest tree, right? Because what happens is that if you're an underdog project or you're a new project, the number one thing that you need to get is attention, right? That's the number one thing you need to get. You need to be part of the conversation in whether that's on crypto, Twitter, or elsewhere. You need to be part of that conversation. And that's why if you look at the actual crypto assets that are the most valuable by market cap outside of BTC and ETH, they are the ones with the most attention, not necessarily the most investable assets, but they're the ones with the most attention. I mean, we can go down the list. BNB, Binance, right? Binance is one of the top exchanges still in the world. Sol for Solana. Solana is very kind of loud, right? There's a lot of fans of Solana. There's a lot of people loud about them. XRP, self-explanatory. They have a huge army, right? Cardano, Charles Hoskinson has like an army of people behind him, right? So I'm not going to go down the list of all of them, but really it's an attention game, right? Chainlink's there. I mean, how many like Link Marines are there? So at the end of the day, like the projects see this and they're like, okay, well, the only way I can get attention is by being loud. And how do you kind of like be loud? Well, you start kind of replying to the maxis of other chains on Twitter, because then you get them riled up and they reply to you. And then suddenly you have all this visibility from someone who has like 200,000 followers kind of replying to you and saying, hey, like, what you said was wrong. Well, they know it's wrong. They don't care because now you've just given them free attention, right? So when you think about it from that perspective, the competitors have to do this in order to compete. That's like literally a thing that they don't have a choice here. If they don't do it, they're just not going to get the attention. And because of that, it means that a lot of the things that they say are going to be completely false. And they're going to be things that may not be immediately false, may take a couple of years to actually be proven out by the market, proven out by the fundamentals, but eventually reality catches up. Like it's free to spin narratives, right? It costs nothing to send a tweet out or anything like that. But reality has a massive cost to it. You can't ignore reality forever, and reality will eventually catch up. So I think when it comes to competitors for Ethereum, the L2 roadmap has taken a while to play out, right? And it's still playing out. There's a lot of issues with it, as you said. Like we've solved some issues, and there are more issues that remain, and we're going to solve them. But they're going to take longer to solve than some other competitor coming along and saying, hey, we can do all of this today. But in reality, maybe they can do it today for a short period of time. And then if they start getting usage or start getting kind of like more eyeballs on it, the cracks begin to show. And then the promises and the narratives begin to break down. Reality sets in and everyone's like, oh, okay, I guess I better walk back that narrative now because it's not, people can see it's not true anymore. And they start to spin the narrative again. They start to change the narrative again. So we've both seen this many, many times over the years, competitors come and go. But I think what I love most about Ethereum is that Ethereum's gone through this, mind you. I mean, we expected proof of stake to be out in 2017, right? Like Ethereum has definitely gone through this period of kind of change over the years and narratives changing and so on and so forth, especially around ETH as an asset, like going from just a pure gas token to being money, being a store of value. We've seen this all evolve. But now Ethereum, at least over the last couple of years especially, has this very defined roadmap, both for layer one and for scaling via layer twos. And this is a roadmap that the entire Ethereum community, or at least almost the entire Ethereum community, is aligned around, which is the most important thing, because if you have alignment around it, that means you can execute on it. And that's what we're seeing. We're seeing it executed on very, very nicely, but there's still a lot of work left to do. But yeah, that's why I've always been such a huge fan of Ethereum, and my conviction on Ethereum has just grown over time, is because Ethereum is executing very, very nicely on a roadmap after pivoting a bunch of times, mind you. I mean, we abandoned execution sharding, right? We completely changed the design of proof of stake Ethereum. We may change it again in the future. Who knows? But what I like is that we have the smartest people working on Ethereum. We have the defined roadmaps. We have the willingness and the ability to adapt and not just stay in one spot, which has always been my kind of bull case for Ethereum generally. So that's kind of my take on the competitive side of things. And at the end of the day, there's also, like, when it comes to investing, people want to play the new thing, right? They like buying the new thing because it's like, it's new and exciting. I'm going to play it. Maybe I know that it's all bullshit, but hey, I'm going to hold it for a little bit and then trade it back to ETH. And we see that play out because ETH outperforms most things over the long term. And that brings me to ETH BTC, which we'll talk about after, if you wanted to give like a take on what I just said there about the competitors.
Yeah, I think the most important thing you said is like, we've always dealt with competitors. Bitcoin's always dealt with competitors. Like it's always going to be there. You're not going to just not have them, right? Because there's too much money to be had. And like at the same time, ETH has learned some things from competitors. Like this, like Cosmos is probably a good example. Like we've learned some things there. Like, and maybe they're not a direct competitor, but like to me in the long run, and not like we're both long-term minds, right? Like, and I get it. I've given up some money on the short term. I could be chasing these things and trying to trade out of them, but like, what's going to matter most is the investability of the underlying asset, right? Like the chains themselves might have all these promises, but what's the actual like asset underneath going to be worth in 10, 20, 30 years? Like, even if the chain's somewhat successful, right? And this is like what Bitcoiners used to always hit on Ethereum about, like, okay, well, what's like, it's ETH is inflating at a time like 5, 6, 7%. It was going to do that for a while. And like, I do kind of look back and enjoy that Bitcoiners challenge the Ethereum community a little bit to think of this, because I think it pushed us to like think of how ETH should be money. And like, even if these competitors are going to be good for a couple of years or whatever, like, how investable is that asset underneath it in the long term, right? And I think that's where people, especially with this line we're talking about being drawn, Bitcoin and ETH, ETFs, that line kind of, and then the assets below that, and just the moneyness of BTC and ETH. To me, that's what will speak volumes, right? And in the longer terms of things.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And I mean, as you said, like it is a long-term game. It's like decades long game. It's not short-term. And I think
We're
most
already
people
one
in
decade
crypto,
in, by the way, which is crazy.
Exactly, exactly, and most people just do not think on those time frames. And I get it. If you're a first cycler, if you're new to crypto, you're not thinking about like a decade out, right? You're thinking, especially if you're young, if like you're in your early 20s, you're thinking, I'm gonna make money right now. Like I want to be rich because it's your first experience in the markets. You got no idea what's happening in crypto because there's just so much stuff happening, and everyone's trying to get your attention, and you don't know how to evaluate these things. So I get it. Like I get it. I mean, it's annoying for us having to deal with it because we, I guess, quote unquote, know better because we're more experienced. But we were there once upon a time. I remember when I got into Bitcoin in 2013, I was a total noob. I got wrecked on every shitcoin that was out back then. There wasn't that many, but I got wrecked because I thought I knew better. But yeah,
Feather coin and all
yeah, oh
those.
yeah, Feathercoin, Quark Coin, Doge was the big one that I got wrecked on back
Litecoin.
then. Yeah, yeah. So just so many of those kind of things happening back then. But I learned my lesson and I took that with me, and I think that's the main thing, right? But so I think the next thing I want to talk about, which still on the topic of markets, is ETH BTC. So basically ETH's performance against BTC, because this is something that I think too many people pay too much attention to, especially over the shorter term. And I mean, I'm guilty of it myself. I do kind of pay attention to it because I like to think that, you know, ETH is competing with BTC, and obviously as ETH BTC goes up, it means ETH is more valuable against Bitcoin. But I think what people pay attention to is the actual ETH BTC chart itself, which is extremely noisy. I don't think the ETH BTC chart has any real bearing on anything except the, I guess, like price action of BTC and ETH. Like, I don't really think anyone's necessarily trading ETH BTC. They're just trading BTC things and ETH things. Now, obviously, over the last, it's probably like 8 months now, ETH BTC has pretty much been down only. And I think that the major reason for that is just the ETF stuff, right? Because think about it. If you were trying to be in crypto and you were going to be in crypto from June of last year, which was, you know, crypto went up a little bit from the bottom, but it was still kind of a bear crab market. And you were thinking, okay, I'm going to get back into the market. What are you going to do? Are you going to go and bid on like ETH and the other kind of assets out there? Or are you going to bid on the thing that BlackRock just filed an ETF for, right? Are you going to long the thing that BlackRock just filed an ETF for? And this bid kept increasing as time went on, as the market became more and more confident that these ETFs were going to get approved. So just a very easy trade for people to take, very easy selling point for people to take here. And of course, yes, ETH, I think in November, BlackRock filed for the ETH ETF, but the trade was still on BTC because people said, okay, well, I can just wait. I can just keep bidding BTC. I'll just keep trading that. And then when the narrative heats up around ETH getting an ETF, then I'll trade that, which I think is going to happen relatively soon. And I think it maybe is in the process of happening right now. But that is first and foremost the reason why ETH BTC has gone down, because of that bid there. I don't think it's necessarily got to do a lot with the quote unquote competitors to Ethereum getting a bid, right? I think that that's just kind of some hot ball of money that's just going back and forth. There's not that much long-term investor capital in there. So I do think it's definitely the ETF stuff. Now, in saying that, if you actually compare ETH BTC's performance this bear market to last bear market, it is significantly better. Like, I don't think people realize that last bear market, ETH went down 90% against BTC from top to bottom, I think. And, you know, this bear market, it went down like, I think 50% or something like that, or at its deepest retrace, maybe a bit less than that. Probably not even, like, I haven't actually looked at it, but like definitely
Yeah,
not that much.
I don't even think that much, because I think it went from like 0.085 to like point, what was the low recently? Like
It was around 40,
0.05.
45. I think. Yeah. So not quite
Yeah,
50%,
yeah,
but
not quite.
yeah,
Yeah.
about 45%, right? So which is completely different to down 90%. Like the numbers may seem relatively close, but they're not. Like percentages don't work that way on kind of like on the way down there. So like if you look at it from that perspective, ETH has already performed significantly better. And this was during a bear and crab market, right? This was during like a period of time where BTC had all the attention due to the ETF stuff. So from here on out, like I'm not going to say that this is like the pico bottom of ETH BTC, but from here on out, you can make the strong case that ETH should outperform BTC, right? Because ETH has all of the stuff that we just talked about on the USD side of things, but that also applies to ETH BTC because if ETH USD is going up and ETH USD is performing very strongly, then it logically follows that it's going to be performing strongly than BTC because BTC already had its main catalyst kind of trade play out, right? Yes, it's got these passive flows coming in, but this kind of hot ball of money within crypto, this crypto native money, hasn't really bid ETH yet, right? They've been in BTC and they've been in all these other things down the risk curve. They're kind of underexposed to ETH to an extent, right? So I think that there is a strong case to be made that from here on out, ETH should outperform BTC. And historically, during bull markets, ETH has outperformed BTC. And then if the ETFs get approved in May, ETH will be on equal footing as BTC in terms of the actual money it has access to. So, like, if I was personally, I mean, this is not investment advice, but if I was holding BTC right now, I'd be swapping it for ETH, right? Yes, it's a bit risky because ETH BTC could go down more from here, and maybe you could get a better entry. But like, I couldn't think of a better setup right now for ETH to outperform BTC here. At least that's my kind of view on ETH BTC. Maybe you've got a different view or something to complement that.
Yeah, I agree. I think we're getting to that pivot point. It's hard to this point because you said they had the tailwinds of the ETF news for a long time, like a year, and then the ETF approval. And now BTC has that constant bid of inflows, right? From more retail money, investor 401k money coming in that ETH doesn't have yet. And I truly do think people are grossly on the sideline of ETH. I think a lot of people have been BTC because of the ETF stuff and ETH competitors thinking that they're going to strongly outperform ETH. We're getting potentially 3 months away from an ETH ETF approval. And I don't think a lot of people think it's going to happen. I think Polymarket has it at like 50-50.
Mm-hmm.
Polymarket's a prediction market. But I think that's like smarter money. I think if you like polled true crypto Twitter, they think it's probably less. I think it's way higher than that. That's not just me being in the ETH bull. Like I just think if you read the tea leaves and Fink's like record on ETF approvals, like it seems more obvious to me. We might not see that. I mean, we had a nice bounce on the ratio today, and it's kind of been bottoming around like this like 0.05 level for a while. I think like a few months now. I think we'll start to see I think people start to realize it's going to happen a month out, something like that. But I think people are starting to think about it, right? And I think we saw that today for the first time. And what's funny is the day Bitcoin got approved for the ETF, ETH rallied like crazy on the ratio. I think it was up like 15-20% on the ratio or something like that in a single candle. But then
And
Bitcoin
that's that
dumped and
hot
people,
ball of money, right? That I was talking about.
yes,
Yeah.
exactly. They started chasing it, but then people were like, "Oh no, it's still the news." And then, of course, because ETH's a little more risky asset on the downside, it always like kind of underperforms a little bit, right? And it kind of went back to where it was. But yeah, that hot ball money will start chasing it before the headlines, like eventually. And as these like alt/ETH trades cool off, I think it's going to be a race in, right? And I think these narratives that we've talked about, like everything's kind of coming together at once. And let's not forget, we also had the Bitcoin halving narrative in there, which will just help crypto in general. Now, I personally think that's a low IQ narrative, but you know what? Low IQ narratives work, right? It's worked great for Bitcoin. There will be less sell pressure. I think just once again, it's funny, like almost 4 years to the date, everything's perfectly aligning, right? Like ETH ETF in May, Bitcoin happening, I think it's in July, end of June, something like that. It's kind of a bit of a moving target, but it's somewhere around then. And all these things are going to start to align. We've been, let's see, 3 years ish since the last top. Is that right? And we've been saying bull market's coming. I think we've been pretty spot on with it's going to take some time. This is the most bullish I've personally been in 3-4 years. And what's great is I don't see much froth in the market. If you look at like open interest on ETH, it's very, very low. Like as far as like leverage trading, I've had not a single random friend or family member text me about crypto. I think all of retail is underexposed to ETH. I mean, if unless the world blows up, we go into World War III, there's always a black swan event that could happen, right? If everything kind of stays on this path, I don't see a reason he doesn't go to 20K. That's just how I feel right now.
Yeah, and I think that like even for the macro people out there, the people who follow the macro TradFi kind of side of things, over the last 12, 18 months, they were like max doomer. They was like the world's gonna end, rates are going to this, there's too much debt, blah, blah. And a lot of these people don't actually understand how things work at all. It was always hilarious reading these takes and being like, guys, like you have absolutely no idea how it works. Like they're like, oh, the US has so much debt, it needs to pay it back. I'm like, guys, like the US has aircraft carriers. They don't care about their debt. Like, who's gonna come collect the debt? Like I just think a lot of people just don't realize how things actually work, right? They see these numbers and they're just like, oh my God, everything's going to go down and it's going to collapse and inflation's really high. And then, of course, we saw inflation come down, right? The rates went up, yes, fine. But like ETH actually bottomed in June, right, of 2022, and that was the peak of inflation in the US back then. And then since then, it's been down only. And now we're on the verge of the rates being cut. Now, of course, markets are always forward-looking. They're not just going to wait for this to happen. They've been pricing this in for months now. And then you've got like the ETF stuff, which falls into the positive macro stuff as well. So even if you wanted to just follow along with the macro stuff, like there is a very bullish case to be made there, but I've always generally made the point that crypto, at least until recently, has been relatively too small to really care too much about the macro, or at least follow it too closely. It usually lags, to be honest, because stocks will go to all-time highs first. I mean, the SPX just hit the all-time high, right, recently. It'll go to all-time high first, and then crypto will follow because it's just a riskier asset class, which is traditionally what's happened. With the ETFs, that might change things going forward as well, and it might kind of suppress these 4-year cycles that we've been seeing. I mean, it already has to an extent. But yeah, I mean, I don't know what the bear case is right now. As you said, like there's the black swan that could happen. I mean, I don't even know if like a large scale war would stop this train, right? Like, I mean, it depends on what the war looks like too. And I guess if we get another pandemic, I don't think we're going to have the same thing because it's not a black swan. Everyone will be like, oh, it's another pandemic, right? They're just going to be like, oh, well, COVID didn't like, I was actually good for the market, so let's just bid everything up, right? So who knows? The whole point of a black swan is that you can't predict it, obviously. So we'll have to see kind of if anything like that happens. But yeah, I'm struggling really hard to find any reason to be bearish right now, to be honest. Like there are just so many reasons to be bullish on things, especially ETH. And as you said, like there's not much froth yet in the crypto markets. Like, yeah, okay, BTC has done a really big move, and some of the other things have done big moves. But people don't remember what it was like in 2021 or late 2020, how frothy it got back then. Like when you start seeing that level of froth again, start seeing people like Elon Musk go on SNL and shill Dogecoin, like that's peak froth, right? And shit like those random NFTs just going up like massively that we saw in 2021, like that sort of stuff is froth. What we've been seeing is not froth. It's just like the same money rotating around, like the same hot ball of money rotating around, and it's really just crypto natives just PvPing each other, as they say. So even that case, yeah, there's just not much of a bearish case to be made there, in my opinion. And I think that one thing that a lot of people forget as well is that BTC actually didn't break 30K until October. Right, the ETF was filed in June by BlackRock, but then BTC I think went to 30K and then went back down 25K because everyone was kind of fading it, saying, "Oh, this is just going to get like rejected again," because every other ETF got rejected, and then slowly but surely, the confidence started building. And then when Grayscale won their case against the SEC, everyone was like, "Okay, well now the SEC's hand is forced. They're going to approve this ETF," and that's when you saw that massive run from 30K to like 45K leading up to the ETF, which is a huge run for BTC because, as you said, the market cap is so large. That's an absolutely massive run. So I think the same thing is happening with the ETH ETF right now, where the confidence is very low. As you said, prediction market 50-50, crypto natives probably even less than that. But as we see more of these kind of issuers go back and forth with the SEC, like as you mentioned, Franklin Templeton today just submitted their application, but there's been other back and forth with other issuers. As we see more and more of that happening over the coming weeks, we're going to see the confidence build. And then that confidence is going to build into the price. And then the price is going to beget the price. And then the price is going to go up because, stop FOMO and so on and so forth, right? And then the market will become peak confident if it does get approved in May. And as I said earlier, we may see a similar kind of thing where it's like, I'll sell the news, quote unquote, rest for a little bit, and then continue up from there. But like, yeah, that's in May, and that's after the halvening. As you said, the halvening is another big narrative in April, right? So we just have like this bullish narrative on bullish narrative and bullish narrative that, in my opinion, has not been priced in for ETH at all yet. Really, I mean, a little bit maybe recently, but not really. And I think once you see ETH BTC really outperforming, that's when you can probably have confidence that it's beginning to be priced in. I think ETH USD is not enough because ETH USD has typically been following BTC USD up. Until you start seeing ETH BTC outperform, that's when you'll know that people are actually now bidding on ETH ETF being approved. That's the kind of signal to me, at least. And then after that, as we said, there's so many other catalysts, but then we go into probably a full blown bull market, and it just gets crazy from there.
Right. Pure chaos at that point. I think the last point I want to make is like people being bearish this ETF approval. Like I see a lot of people like think it's the government's decision, which is it's nice to think that, but in all reality, these financial institutions own these government officials, right? Either through donations or like whatever it is, right? Like they're the ones with the real influence. There's a reason Larry Fink's like whatever I said, 478 and one in ETF approvals, right? Like BlackRock makes a lot of money off ETFs. And there's a lot of, it's not corruption, but there's a lot of backhanded agreements, right, in Washington. And the more, like you said, the more financial institutions that have power that apply for this ETF, the more likely it is. Because if they all want it, if they all want a slice of the pie, if they're all seeing dollar signs because of the fees they're going to make off this thing, it's going to happen, right? Like Gensler can claim and cry all he wants that it's not going to happen. At the end of the day, if you got every large asset manager knocking on your door in Washington telling you that you better approve this or whatever, it's going to happen, right? And I think that's the real sign. The more applications we see, the more push we see from these larger asset managers and financial institutions. I think that's all that you really need to know. So,
And it's
I
an
guess I'll
election
kind
year,
of
right? And the
exactly,
Dems need
yeah,
every good bit of goodwill they can get at this point.
exactly. Well, and so by the way, that's another like, I mean, that's not till November, and I don't want to like take any sides here, but like that could like change markets up too, right? And I think we're seeing, like we didn't even talk about, but you just mentioned S&P 500 all-time high, election year. Like there's a lot of catalysts that are coming for markets or that are already here, right? It's gonna be a wild next 12 months. But yeah, I just don't see the bear narrative. Like who's sitting here is thinking they're gonna dump ETH and rebuy at 1,000 right now, right? I just don't see it. So I'm personally excited for the next 12 months. I think we've deserved it for sure as the ETH community. And it's funny that people just like ETH just executes and things happen and people move on and forget. Like it's even funny that proof of stake and a merge happen and like people just are like, oh man, it's been perfect. So let's take it for granted, right? So I mean, I think if any asset at this point deserves a nice little rally, I know I'm biased, but I think ETH's that one.
Yeah, and I think like ETH and Ethereum just always suffering from success, right? Like it's just so successful and it does everything like so well that it kind of becomes boring for people because people expect Ethereum to do
Yeah.
the right thing, so to speak, or to like be boring and not like have drama and not have like downtime and things like that. If you want to kind of take that view on things, right? And that is not maybe something that could be traded upon. And I think that traders get very frustrated with ETH because of that, because ETH probably like trades more like a long-term investment than just like a hot ball trade that they could take. Because at the end of the day, like crypto native traders, they don't want to just sit in assets for long periods of time. They want to trade based on the weekly, maybe a monthly kind of time frame, not like years, especially not decades or anything like that. So for them, it's a kind of a thing of, okay, well, what does the ETH chart look like? Okay, well, I can't trade this because the ETH chart doesn't look like anything good because it doesn't. I mean, I've watched some trader videos and they all get very frustrated with ETH because they're like, this doesn't look like anything. I can't trade this. It's noise. It's like, yeah, because I think ETH is treated more as a long-term investment than it is as a trade. Whereas all these other assets, they just don't, they're not long-term investments for most people. They've got very clearly defined like meme lines or trend lines you can draw on a chart. They've got very defined narratives you can point to, things like that. And when most of the people kind of like trading the asset are just short-term traders, then of course they're going to be able to dictate where the direction goes rather than the kind of investors here. And that's why you see, I mean, one of the reasons why you see so much volatility on these other assets compared to ETH and BTC as well. But it's kind of funny when you look at it from that. It's where Ethereum and ETH suffered from success a bit. But if you just take the longer term view, ETH has been such a strong asset for such a long period of time now. And it hasn't even been that long, really. I mean, like we were at $80 back in what 2020. Like if you really want to take it from like the COVID dump, 100. I mean, we were at $100 for a couple of weeks after the COVID dump, and that was not that long ago. It's 4 years ago or something now. It's not decades or anything like that. And if you go back a decade to 2014, that was the ETH ICO. So like ETH's performed like magically for a very long time. So I think people just need to take a longer term mindset when it comes to ETH. Like ETH is not a trade. Like ETH is not something that you can, you're not going to make 100x off ETH. You're not going to DJ and gamble on ETH. You're not going to be able to trade ETH very successfully unless you're using leverage. But then again, you're going to blow yourself up using leverage probably most of the time, right? So that's what I try to get through to people is that like ETH is more of like your long-term thing. Have a DGen stack, play with that. Go do whatever you need to get it out of your system. Because I know a lot of people get FOMO, right? They need to do it. They're like, I need to gamble. I was like, okay, that's fine. Go do that. But like, don't use your entire stash to do that because it just means you're going to end up with nothing. So it's like a typical thing of, okay, 90% in like ETH and other long-term investments, 10% DGen stack or whatever way you want to kind of weight it there. People can do that. But yeah, I definitely think that people need to just really understand that ETH is not a degen play. ETH is a very long-term investment that will go up over time, slowly, but it's not going to give you 100x over like a couple of months like meme coins will. But it also has none of the risk of meme coins, right?
Right. Exactly. No, I think that's a good point. I mean, not to throw out the typical like not financial advice, but like if you're not in it for a long-term play, like ETH is the long-term play. I mean, BTC is to a point, but BTC is like the safer, boring long-term play. I would say ETH's like crypto could be massive, like
well, more involved play too, right? Because you can do more things with your ETH and get exposure to other things as well.
Exactly. Yeah, 100%. But it's not like we're not saying like go buy ETH tomorrow and it's going to be 20K tomorrow or in 2 days, right? Like it's going to still take a little bit of time, but like anybody that invests in ETH to like truly kind of believe in the community and the vision and the execution, right? Because I think that has been important for ETH, and I think it's a great perspective you just put out there. Like only 4 years ago we were at $100. Only 9 years ago we were at $1. We're at 2,600 now. Like that's not a lot. Like tell someone they could make 2,600x like in 10 years, people would just freak out, right? And like it's easily forgotten. I mean, like we said, even from bottom, we're up 4x or whatever it is. Like that, it's crazy how fast we forget like how successful crypto returns can be. But yeah, definitely. I mean, if you want to be an ETH, just hold on. Trust me, everything's going to be fine.
Yeah. Well, that's it. And I think like a lot of people, at least a lot of the more plugged in people from what I've seen, what they tend to do is they use that DGen stack, but then they just roll the profits into ETH, right? They don't want to go to cash for very long. Like unless it's like they expect the whole market to crash or like for us to go into another crypto bear market, they don't really want to go to cash. They'll pay their taxes, whatever. But outside of that, they want to go into crypto again. So what are they going to go into? They're not going to go into something even more DGen. Like they're going to take a lot of that into ETH and into BTC as well, and add that to their long-term stash. And then maybe they go degen some more. But like as you increase your capital pool, you become more and more conservative because you're like, okay, I've made all this money now. I don't want to lose it. Maybe I'll reduce the percentage that I'm putting into this degen stuff because now the percentage is a lot higher in dollar terms. So, and I've got a lot of friends who do this. I know a lot of people who have done this. I've personally done this. Like I was a lot more degen last cycle than I am now. I mean, I'm not even degen at all now. I think the most degen thing I do is angel investments, right? Which I mean, depending on how you look at it, can be pretty degen, but that's kind of my degen stash, so to speak. I'm not doing airdrop farming. I'm not speculating on meme coins. I'm not doing any of that. But I was in 2020, like during DeFi summer. I mean, we both were like the food farms and everything, right? But that's when our bankrolls were like, a lot less. And we kind of like increased it over time. We became more conservative. And now we're just like, I'm happy with what we've got. And we're happy to just keep it in ETH because we want to obviously not be in cash because cash is trash, as they say, right? To an extent. And then just buy ETH dips and things like that when we've got some spare capital on the side as well. More of those macro ETH dips, like those big ones where like 880 or stuff like that, like below 1K, kind of at the end of the bear market sort of thing. But like everyone has their own kind of ways of going about it. But yeah, as you said, like ETH is definitely a long-term thing. Like it's not a short-term thing. And I think people just have bad expectations when it comes to ETH still, which just puzzles me because ETH is such a large market cap. But yeah.
Yeah. I think one important thing is always like when things get frothy, take a little off the table just to set aside to buy that 60% dip at some point, right? Even if you buy it a little early at 50%, like it's always nice to set some aside to rebuy because it when things get frothy, yeah, you might sell like a little early, but it's always going to go lower at some point than that, right? If you could sell the absolute top and buy the absolute bottom, yeah, that would be wonderful, right? Like when things get really, really frothy, it's always good to take a little off the table and just set aside to like rebuy that bottom. And like you always want to buy the bottom sooner than it actually is. I feel like if you wait that like 2 year period, like that's kind of the sweet spot. But yeah, the more cycles you go through, the more you realize actually how simple this market actually is.
Exactly, and it just comes with experience. Like we can tell people whatever, but like they most of the time they're probably not going to listen to us because they have to experience it for themselves. Especially if they're younger, have a bit of an ego about them, haven't had experience with markets before. They're definitely not going to listen most of the time, and that's just the natural order of things, I think, and the way things have to go. And I actually do recommend people get wrecked, once or twice, not with their whole stash or anything like that, but like lose some money because that is the best lesson. Because then you become humbled. You're like, okay, well maybe I'm not as good as I thought I was because crypto bull markets tend to like inflate your ego and inflate your confidence because everything's going up and you think you're like the best investor ever. I mean, I still felt this in 2017 where I bought some stuff and I was just like, oh my God, it went up. I'm a genius. But then I quickly kind of caught myself and was like, no, I don't think so. Like everything's going up together. Like I've been through this before. It's not that I'm a genius. I'm just like in the right place at the right time right now. And yeah, I think not falling into that trap is critically important for kind of investing. But it comes with time, comes with experience. And I think that I don't know. I mean, I think that the Daily Gwei listeners, and viewers, a lot of them are probably like second cyclers, but there's a few first cyclers in there as well. So it just depends. I think maybe some third cyclers, but I think by your second cycle you start to get the hang of things. But first cycle is yeah, it's messy. You learn the hardest lessons in the first cycle.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a shit show. I had a lot of Bitcoin in early 2013 that I felt a genius about and lost it all leverage trading. And I'm like, okay, I'm actually going to be a value investor now. And that's when I found ETH. So I'm never going back to those days. But yeah, you gotta learn those lessons. There's no doubt about that.
Yep, yeah, exactly. All right, well, we've gone for over an hour, I think. So I think that's maybe the perfect time to kind of finish it up there for today. I think if people aren't sufficiently bullish after that episode on ETH, then I don't know what's going to help you. And I hope that we can like revisit this episode in like a year's time. Not saying that we're going to go a year without doing another episode. Hopefully we don't do that. But like in a year's time and see like how right or wrong we were on things and like where we actually top out at. Because I'm going to laugh if we top out like below 15K or something and that we're just like we're both like very wrong, but at the same time like just the general trend regardless of price targets, I think the general trend from here is very, very bullish for ETH just generally, and the crypto space as a whole. And I think we obviously both agree on that, and I think that a lot of listeners will agree on that. But yeah, just don't blow yourself up, guys. Like that's the number one piece of advice I always give people. Like I don't give investment advice, I give advice on like don't blow yourself up. That's just general kind of life advice, I think, because if you do that and you get sidelined and you don't have capital put back in and the market gets ahead of you, it's the absolute worst feeling. And you're just gonna exit crypto and hate crypto because of it.
Yep. Survive in advance.
Exactly. That's it. All right. Well, yeah. Thanks everyone for listening and watching. Be sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet. Give the video a thumbs up, subscribe to the newsletter, and join the Discord channel. And we'll catch you when we catch you. Obviously, we rug sometimes for 4 months. Sometimes it's like a month. We'll see. We tried to do that at 2 week cadence originally, but we didn't stick to that. But we'll see when we're back. It's just going to be a random kind of thing on the drive through here. But yeah, glad you enjoyed the episode. And yeah, thanks Eric for joining me today.